Hello and welcome to our mini-series Blue PlanEAT. Today we're here on the south coast of Devon asking, are there really plenty more fish in the sea? We're going to figure out if there is a sustainable way to ensure that we can all have fish on our plate for years to come. So follow me as we discover more. As the old fable goes, give a man a fish and he'll eat well for a day, but teach him to fish, he'll eat well for a lifetime. Unfortunately, the idea that we can continue to do so without long-term consequences and without stocks running out has long gone. Up to 95% of fish stocks currently face collapse, and with many people relying on the sea for a source of food and income, we need to figure out how we can make sure the fish on your plate is sustainably sourced. So today, we'll be looking at balanced harvest. We spoke to Dr. Andrew Griffiths, asking him about how our current fishing practices led to such diverse collapse.
So we've been sort of targeting often top predators in like fisheries ecosystems. If you outfish those large growing organisms, they can have all kinds of effects down through the food chains. Sometimes it won't just kind of bounce back and recover. And this can cause kind of whole changes in ecosystems, and people are currently worried about kind of changes to, instead of being kind of like bony fish, ecosystems becoming dominated by things like jellyfish or complete changes in the way that ecosystems function. And there are even cases of like parts of the ocean becoming almost lifeless.
So why are we losing these key species? How did this happen?
We probably have one of the kind of most narrow diets in terms of what fish were consumed. If you go back hundreds of years, decades, we probably had a much more diverse diet. People have become kind of focused on a few species that they're very, very familiar with, perhaps. So they become targets for overfishing, potentially. But if we kind of, that's what lots of sustainable fisheries kind of advocates would argue, that if we have a broader diet where we consider fish from different points on the food chain, or we broaden our diet out a little bit more, perhaps we'd have a bit more of a sustainable fishery.
So, with experts warning of the dangers of eating down the food web, let's take a look at one solution proposed by researchers, where instead of eating down the food chain, we eat up. In this scenario, we would start at the bottom, eating more plants and types of seaweed, then the species that eat those plants, known as foraging fish, things like anchovies, sprats and sardines. By eating up the food web, we'd give slower developing species a chance to recover and avoid causing population collapse of lower trophic species. But even this solution has its critics, who argue that humans require more low trophic fish than can sustainably be caught. And, of course, eating these fish would certainly have an impact on the species higher up the food chain. So it's clear eating up does have its drawbacks, but is there another way? Recent research has identified a new way of eating marine species, known as balanced harvest. But what would that look like? Essentially, instead of eating up or down the food web, we would eat a proportional amount from each level. We'd cut back on some of the things we love to eat, like cod, and replace it with things like monkfish or even whiting, really redistributing the balance of what we like to eat. So, sounds simple enough, but a little bit harder to put into practice. That's why we decided to head down to Brixham to find the man who has figured out how to make us want to enjoy perhaps those less obvious fish and get us eating them off our plates.
The problem you've got is that behind cod, there isn't another species that can satisfy everybody's flavour, because all of those other fish are very diverse in flavour and textures. But in rockfish we've managed to change. We've flipped around from 60% cod to 60% local fish. Nowadays consumers are more powerful than ever and actually really care that the seafood's origin is somewhere sustainable. And we're also trying to use fish that the fishermen normally throw away, so small dabs, small plaice, small gurnets, lesser spotted dogs, all the stuff that ends up as crab bait. And actually we want to find a way of using it. So people are willing to try. People just need an education. You know, they look at a fish catch and they're like, wow, it's amazing, but what do I do with it? And I think that's a big challenge. So I think it's right to be eating a lot more diverse species, and it'd be great if they stayed here. But we've got a big cultural shift to go through before that actually happens.
So Rockfish have managed to get its customers to enjoy a balanced and sustainable harvest with no resistance. They must be cooking up some delicious alternatives. Out of all fish restaurants in the south, Rockfish were the only ones successfully implementing this balanced harvest solution. But the question remains as to how to make it more widespread. Until we figure out just how to do that, I think I'm going to head into Rockfish and get myself some of that sustainably caught food. See you next time.